I was past halfway through my lesson, so it had to be over past 8 o'clock when we all heard these explosions outside a classroom. But as more were being shot, then I started thinking this is not a generator or an electrical outlet thing that has exploded. The kids that saw him standing said a shooter. So many of my students threw themselves at the floor, curled up in the floor. Others were standing and frozen. Others were trying to get to the front of the end of the class where I was. And this person kept on shooting and shooting and shooting, what seemed like an eternity. There had to be at least 15 gunshots. The gunman, this is the entrance to Berkey Hall from Grand River. Grand River is the big, busy street in East Lansing. This man came from, go up the stairs, and there was probably no one in these classrooms to the left or the right. But my classroom was pretty packed with my 40-some students. So he came here, and he stood on the door threshold. And I'm gonna draw him for a moment. And he shot here, and here, and here, and here. I was in the front, so I don't know if he tried to target me or not, but I was lucky that nothing touched me. I didn't squat, I stood there until he stepped out. Then he turned around at some point. So when he turned around, I think at least I thought of the possibility that he could be then walking down the hall towards the other end of my classroom where my door is. And then I threw myself at that door and held the knob, and then squatted and used my own weight as leverage. And I put my foot against the wall, the frame of the door, so that I could pull that door shut and not allow anyone in. I was fully conscious that all it would take is a shot to the knob to open it. But there was nothing I could do. There was nothing else I thought I could do to change things. And while that was happening, and none of us knew whether he was going to come back in. We didn't know if he was walking down the hall to another classroom and shoot more people or return. I told my students to break the windows and escape through the windows. So they were climbing and crawling and throwing themselves out the classroom through the windows. And that lasted for about 10 minutes. Finally, the police arrived, and when I saw this person outside with a big gun, I still didn't know it was a policeman, so I'm frightened. Until I saw the uniform, I realized, no, this is a policeman. So I opened the door finally, and then they walked in, and they asked me if I was the professor, and I said yes. And then they came in, about 4 to 5 policemen. At that moment, then I feel like I could check what was going on, what was the damage, because I didn't have to hold the door anymore. So there were students close to the front of the blackboard saying, I heard, help, it hurts. And then there were some kind of stuck in between the rows of chairs, some saying, help, it hurts, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. But then there were 2 girls that really haunt me, the images, because one of them was in the middle of one of those rows. I believe that was Alexandria. And then there was Ariel, who was in the passage between, when you leave the rows of chairs, then you can walk freely up and down the classroom on either side. So Ariel was in one of those close to the window, and Alexandria was in the middle of the rows of chairs. They were, in a pool of blood. I've never seen so much blood in my life. And I was calling attention to the police, and they were saying the paramedics were in their way. And my students, some of them were very heroic. Then they didn't escape through the windows. They stayed, and they were helping some of their peers, some of their classmates, trying to hold, keeping them from bleeding to death, holding their wounds. And then the police asked us to leave so that only the paramedics were in the classroom. And all along, as I walked out of the classroom into the front of the building where there were many police cars, and they were not letting people leave because the gunman was loose, so they didn't want people to go home. So I was there waiting, and while I was in the classroom, I called my wife, who happened to be in the building as well, waiting for me. She was saved by the grace of God because she hid under a bench and she was not seen. But anyways, my phone died, but I heard that she was fine. So I walked out, and then eventually I borrowed a phone from a policeman, and then we found each other. And then they escorted us to the Eli Broad Museum, which is next door to Berkey. And then my students, the ones that stayed helping others, and myself and my wife, we were all moved to Berkey. So I know which ones survived because they were there with me in Berkey. The ones that I don't know whatever happened was the ones who escaped through the windows. And then, of course, the ones that were taken to the hospital. Okay. Later, a day or two later, I learned that two students didn't make it, Ariel and Alexandria. So those images have been haunting me. I think that the horror I saw there, if our lawmakers, if members of Congress really saw what I saw, instead of one more statistic, 3 more people dead, 2 more people here, 12 there, if they actually saw, or if they experienced that in their own personal lives, the laws of this country would change. And gun restriction laws would be passed immediately. And not this, let's be level-headed, let's not rush to making decisions, let's be rational. That is BS. No, something needs to be done in this country, and it needs to be based on our humanity. When our humanity is touched and we see what damage that was caused, then we rush to make decisions for the good of people, not trying to weigh out everything, what it is, good or possible for my position of power in the U.S. government. This needs to change based on our humanity, not reason, not rational, not level-headed decisions. Nothing that has really changed society has happened because of that. And I bet you that if those congressmen had that happen to them and they saw it, they would be shamed into action, or at least their humanity touched into action.